All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Can people hear me? Someone give me an indication.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, all right. So, hello, and welcome to this special live stream of Free Code Camp Columbus. Free Code Camp is an international organization whose mission it is to help people learn to code for free by creating thousands of videos, articles, and interactive coding lessons, all freely available to the public. More than 40,000 people have gotten developer jobs after completing Free Code Camp's proven path, including big companies like Google and Microsoft. Much of the Free Code Camp community is scattered across the globe, and some brave souls have also volunteered their time, resources, and experience to help those interested in obtaining a professional career in software delivery by starting local chapters. This special live stream of Free Code Camp is coming to you from the Columbus, Ohio chapter. We recently surveyed our members asking how we could help bring success to Free Code Camp mission, the Free Code Camp's mission. The top request was to host an event of a panel of Free Code Camp users to share their journey of their previous careers to landing that first job in software delivery. Tonight we have assembled a panel of individuals who will answer questions to our live and virtual audience. Our live audience and panel is coming to you from Cohatch at the Lane Avenue Shopping Center in Upper Arlington, Ohio. And our event is sponsored by Ready Set Agile, a leading provider of Agile training, Scrum training, and Kanban training, as well as Agile coaching, technical mentorship, and self-management to help you obtain feedback rapidly and respond to change. My name is John Riley. I am the Principal Agile Coach and Trainer for Ready Set Agile, and I will be moderating tonight's event. I will be asking questions to all panelists, who will then take 1 or 2 minutes to answer each question. We will then take questions from our live and virtual audience, and we ask that our live audience remain as quiet as possible and that the virtual audience please mute your microphones. And we also ask the panelists to speak up so that the live audience can hear you. The microphone is so that the virtual audience can hear you clearly. Cameras are not required for the virtual audience. However, we encourage you to please post your questions and comments in the text channel of the Discord named Panel Questions. Please also note that we are recording this session and will be posting the recording to social media. So enough of that. Let's go ahead and get started. We have our full panel here, which is awesome. So please allow me to introduce our panel. After I introduce you, then I will just briefly describe your background before your inspiration to get into computers or software development. So to my immediate left is Will Johnston. So Will is a former chef who taught himself coding and now works as a consultant and a software developer at Insight. So here you go.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for that awesome introduction. My name is Will Johnston, and I'm really happy to be here getting to speak to all of you. As a self-taught developer, I think that's sort of a misnomer a lot of times. It definitely wasn't a pursuit that I did alone or by myself, and it's groups like this and other meetups and resources like Free Code Camp and the people that dedicate their time and their resources that made the transition into software development possible to me. So, just want to thank Free Code Camp and the Columbus chapter for having me out tonight and the continual good work that they do to give folks like me and motivated folks like everybody watching the chance to improve their life and do a career that they really love. So I'm going to talk about what led me to...
Yeah, so basically where you were before you got into wanting to have that motivation to go into IT or software development.
Sure. Before I got my first software job, I never received a paycheck for anything but restaurant work in my life. I got my first restaurant job at 14, working the drive-thru at a Fazoli's. Shout out, fast Italian, real fast. I worked in restaurants all through undergrad. I graduated undergrad in 2009. I don't know if you know about anything that was going on in the economy around those times, if we've all blocked that out or not, but it wasn't a great time to enter into the professional workforce. I studied education in school, and so I just kept doing restaurant work, and I really loved it. It was creative, it was fun. You get to curse a lot, which worked out really well for me. You get to eat for free, and so I kept doing it, and eventually worked my way up the chain to becoming an executive chef at a bunch of restaurants around Columbus. Actually, my last restaurant where I was employed as a chef is so plated here in the parking lot right outside, so we're kind of coming full circle, which is exciting. But yeah, it wasn't a scenario where I hated what I was doing. I just found that as I got a little older, I wanted something that still stimulated me creatively, but that provided more time, to spend time at home with my wife and our dog, and restaurants weren't giving me that, and so software development sort of gave me everything that I was looking for.
Thank you very much, Will. So to Will's left is Mike Taylor. Nice to meet you, Mike. Mike just literally walked in the door. You can tell by how many holes are in his clothes right now. Mike has a background in IT support, and he got his first job as a back-end developer with Esports Engine after attending We Can Code It. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your background before you got the inspiration to go into software development.
Yeah, like you said, I was into the IT support side of things, networking, infrastructure, stuff like that. I'd always kind of wanted to be involved with coding. It just kind of never had the time and the full-on drive to do it. But I was actually working for a company in New York City that their primary clients were hotels, bars, restaurants, stuff like that. So when COVID came around, that got hit pretty hard. A lot of us got laid off, and after that, I was kind of browsing around for new jobs, and I thought to myself, I really don't want another job in this field. And I suddenly found myself with the time to devote to coding. So that's what I did. And after a few months of that, with help from things like this community, Free Code Camp, and Amy specifically, helped me out quite a bit. I've felt pretty good about things. I applied for a bunch of jobs after that, and then after not hearing back a little bit, I went into a boot camp, and then kind of made connections through there, boosted confidence. The rest is history.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was a good introduction. So to Mike's left is Amy Bedinghaus. So Amy started out working as a Spanish teacher before learning how to code, and now works as a consultant and a software developer at Insight. So what led you from being a Spanish teacher to getting that inspiration to start to code?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I was a Spanish teacher. I actually majored in Spanish and philosophy, double major in college. And, so definitely on the humanities side of things, but I was always really into, I was a big grammar geek. My students didn't necessarily appreciate that, but I really loved kind of looking at the structure of Spanish and how you could break it down into little tiny bits and pieces, and then use it to create really beautiful and creative and like communicate with each other in this language. And so, I always kind of had that kind of logical way of looking at things, and the same with philosophy. And so long story short, I had initially thought that I wanted to teach on the college level. So I have a master's in Spanish language and literature, and I was kind of going down that path, and realized that once you get your PhD in one of these fields, you basically have to go accept that one job in the whole country where your specialty exactly aligns with what the college is looking for. And I wanted to have more freedom about where I wanted to choose to live and not just have to move to that one place to, find a job. And so I found myself teaching middle school Spanish, which was not what I had really envisioned. I did that for a couple years. The students were really sweet. The school I was working at was really great, but I didn't think I wanted to do it for the rest of my life. And so I kept hearing advertisements on the radio about coding boot camps. And I was like, you can learn how to code in 14 weeks and get a brand new job and a whole new career. Like, that's awesome. And so that's kind of what I was doing beforehand and the beginning of when I thought that I could actually make a change to learn how to code.
All right, thanks for that, Amy. And to Amy's left is Travis Barrett. Can you wave, Travis? Thanks. So Travis is a tech elevator graduate, and he also has gone through an apprenticeship with Apprenti as a registered tech apprenticeship. So, and he's now a full stack developer at JP Morgan Chase. So, Travis, just tell us a little bit about where you were before you started with Tech Elevator in your apprenticeship.
Yeah, thanks. I started out actually in high school, was very nerdy, geeky. I tried doing, it was HTML classes. JavaScript was still like becoming new hotness, and Python was brand new and being developed. And I grew up like on the poor side of the tracks. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. Like, I was figuring all this stuff out on my own in the middle of the night, tying up the phone line with free AOL, like 30 days free, trying to figure stuff out. And that was my plan. I was like, I'm going to try to go to college and like learn this stuff for real. And then 9/11 was my senior year, and I ended up going off to the Marines and did that whole thing. And then I got out and got a lady friend, and then I got a family, and never really went back to it. I was just my goal pretty much at the beginning phase of my life was like try to have adventure, and then it was like try to have a family. And the only thing I really ever wanted out of life was to be a dad. And then I had kids, and I was like, crap, I got to take care of these kids, and it's like, I got to find something that'll pay the bills. So I was doing whatever. I was working in warehouses. I helped start a coffee roastery, traveled a lot doing like security contracting. I had my own company doing that for a while. And I was on the East Coast then. I grew up in Minnesota, and then I was in New Jersey for 10 years after I got out. And then we moved to Columbus because the schools that I could afford in New Jersey were not capable of keeping my kid out of jail because she's like wicked smart and clever. Her mom is a genius, and I'm a troublemaker, and it was just not a good mix. So once we started like looking at where we could move, we ended up like we got too far away from our friends and family and church community there, and just kind of decided like, all right, now like the sky's the limit. We started like throwing darts at the map and centered here in Columbus. It's good cost of living, and I could afford to send my kid to a good school, or I didn't have to pay for it here. But and then I got a job at a steel mill because they had insurance from day one, and we were pregnant with twins again, and it was like, geez. And so I did that for a year, and it came across my Facebook feed, which I don't have social media anymore, so don't look me up. But it came across my Facebook feed, something I had shared previously to like the veteran community was this Apprenti thing, and it wasn't where I was at, so I was like, I don't know, I'll share it for everybody else. And then it came up as like a memory, and it was like, hey, I live here now. This is great, and I applied, took the test, and I scored like 823rd on a 2-hour test that took me 6.5 hours. I did not Google anything, so it just took me a long time. But yeah, and then they called me because JP Morgan just had a special initiative. They wanted to test the apprenticeship program with just a veteran cohort to like meet their own internal goals or whatever. So I, jumped to the head of the line and went to Tech Elevator, and it was Aztec elevator, and we'll give you a year on the job. So it worked out. I survived the drowning.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your introductions. Very much appreciated. So the rest of these questions are going to be round robin. So I'm just going to ask the question once, pass the mic down. And I don't think I have to tell this panel, your honest answer is always going to be preferred. Please don't hold back. I don't think I have to remind you. You kind of talked about the hardships and challenges from your previous career and your motivation. So let's go a little bit more now into your informal learning with coding, software development, and that kind of thing, or maybe some projects that you started on your own, or maybe some other ways that you challenged yourself that was not related to Free Code Camp. So, you don't have to share. If you don't have anything to share, that's okay. Just pass the mic down. Make sure that we can hear you in the mic. But just kind of describe what kind of indie projects you might have worked on.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure the other panelists can relate to this, but before it became my full-time job, I had a full-time job. So finding time to work on projects is always difficult. So what I found worked out for me is that I would try and work coding into the work that I was doing. So the first kind of big project that I did was I was running a restaurant that had no money, and we needed a way to keep track of inventory. And sort of in my lack of knowledge and hubris, I was like, I bet I could, create some inventory software. And I built it in, it's called Google Apps Script, if anybody's ever used it. And at the time, I didn't really know what that was. And then found out later that was just, JavaScript by a different name. And so, built some really rudimentary inventory software that I got to use at work. And so kind of making it, I think what was really important for me about that was that it was kind of in the context of what I was already doing, and it had real value. So I was really motivated to continue to work on it and get it done. And it was maybe one of the first, big projects that I did that kind of kickstarted me wanting to learn to do more.
For me, I really enjoyed messing around with all the free APIs you have access to online. I built a trivia app. I've built one's kind of a thesaurus dictionary type deal. I built one that actually, my first one ever, actually takes you can copy and paste in any amount of text, and it will go through the whole thing, tell you how many times you've used a certain word, stuff like that. That was actually, my wife is a writer, and she had downloaded this software that does that, and it was super old and clunky, and I thought, I could probably do that. So that was kind of my thing, find something that would help out in my life. Then it makes it so much more interesting to keep going with. So stuff like that, and always hacker rank stuff as much as I can. That was kind of my experience.
So I was kind of early in my, working through the Free Code Camp tutorials and building just some of the projects that are on there, which I won't talk about those directly, but a friend of mine reached out and said that his company, which was pretty small, there were just 2 developers there at the time. They needed somebody to come in and do some part-time front-end dev work. And so I was able to join them as, a very, very junior developer or an apprentice. They paid me a little, but I was just there. I was so excited to be there just to learn. And so I kind of cut my teeth helping them rewrite their old application into Vue.js. And so I really kind of learned Vue while I was doing that. And, I remember making data tables and, figuring out how to make an API call so that we could get the data into the table, and, figuring out, we used a component library called Vuetify to, have reusable components and, use their kind of inbuilt styling, because this was an internal facing application, so they didn't need it to be super snazzy. It just needed to be usable. But honestly, I feel like that was kind of like, it wasn't a side project because I was doing it at a company, but it was kind of my opportunity to have some part-time work and work on that while I was still teaching and trying to make the full-time transition into coding.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not really the kind of guy who has time to work on side projects or anything like that. Like I got twins that are 3 years old and an 8-year-old in third grade, and just life kind of takes over. So I had the luxury of just applying for the apprenticeship, and like I had to jump through all like the soft skills interview loops and stuff like that. So all of my project experience came out of being in the boot camp. Essentially, what kind of projects you would make as you went through free code camp, which is actually a prerequisite for the school. They were like, okay, we accept you to the school, but you got to finish this pre-work, and it's all on free code camp. So I did all those projects. When I was in high school, we used to make little text-based games in QBasic or Basic. I don't remember which one it was. And we made like 2-player games where you could like sword fight against each other, and it didn't really. You could just do like a QWERTY and hit enter, and it would be like you did 1 damage. Pretty rudimentary stuff, but yeah, mostly it's just every day is just hacking stuff together and figuring out what works.
Great answers. So now put in, if you can, put in free code camp curriculums into your learning. And so did your approach change any? Or, kind of describe, if you did do the free code camp lessons, how it might have changed your approach to software development.
Yeah. I think using free code camp and other available online tutorials and stuff like that, I think what was important for me is that it a lot of my projects were really focused on the domain I was working in. I was building a lot of stuff that was related to the needs of the restaurants where I was working. So that's a pretty limited scope. So getting access to the challenges and the the lessons there just sort of widened my understanding of what was possible, and I think introduced concepts sooner than I would have gotten to them if I just continued to kind of work on my own stuff.
Yeah, kind of same deal. I did free code camp stuff early on, and it gave me a solid foundation to kind of build from. It's like point you to what you should learn. Yeah, that it's definitely a great resource. Great jumping off point. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So I was on free code camp from like Hello World to continuing, and so I really did start there after I basically posted on Facebook and was like, hey guys, I'm learning how to code. Who has any recommendations? And a couple people pointed me to free code camp. And then I ended up finding this local Columbus chapter. And so, I worked through just from the very beginning. So you start at the top, you do HTML, CSS, like responsive web design, some JavaScript. They've built it out a lot since I worked through some of the stuff, because they didn't even have React on there at that time. They didn't have Python. They didn't have some of the data visualization modules that they have now. So I really focused on front end. And from there, I learned that there was this thing called full stack and back end. And so I started seeking out other resources to learn that stuff. But really, like front end, the basics like JavaScript and your basic HTML, CSS, I learned that on free code camp.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. The free code camp is something I actually use more now than I did before I got my job. Because I'm a full stack developer, so like my front end is all in Angular, and then they say, oh, like we're also gonna like port our back end over to this, this other application, and so new features have to be written in React too. I was like, well, I don't React, like I don't even know Angular, you know, like, and so like, what do I do? Like, I can sit and watch like a few days worth of videos on YouTube, or I can, you know, read a few days in a book. And like Free Code Camp is like that happy medium of like reading to understand and then quick practical application to like solidify it. So like, they're like, oh, you need to start like doing some React. Like, I'm going to Free Code Camp and I'm going to do like 2 days worth of crap on there. And, you know, gets you up to speed a lot faster. And then when I read it, I understand it better. So like, I still use Free Code Camp.
Me too.
Excellent, thank you. Will, I know you're to my left. Don't feel obligated to answer the first question. I know you don't have much time to think about the question after I answer, but so if anyone wants to answer the question first, please just indicate that. So what I'd like to know about Free Code Camp also is, did you receive any help from any other members or outside, outside of just learning on your own, or did you pair up with people, or did any of you have a story about that?
Yeah, so it wasn't specifically this Free Code Camp community, but it was another local tech meetup, and that actually was one of the really pivotal moments for me into transitioning this as a career. It wasn't just the ability to talk to other humans and ask them, the questions that, that sort of engineering, Googling that, you learn to get good at. You're not great at that at the beginning. You don't know how to ask these questions the right way. So it's a lot harder to go and find the answers that you're looking for. So being able to go to a meetup and ask questions to other people was huge for me. And then also the way that it built your confidence, because you don't have anything else to judge your skill on, and then you go and you meet these professional engineers and you talk about something, and I remember at a meetup talking about some new piece of technology that I learned, and I'm talking to a guy that's been doing it for years. He's like, oh, I've never heard of that. That sounds interesting. And that was so revelatory to me, where it was like, oh, to do this professionally, you don't have to know all of it, and like you can't know all of it. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of, it's been really difficult during the pandemic, but getting out and interacting with communities like this, because you just don't know what it's gonna lead to.
Yeah, I made a few connections on it. One of them being Amy here. She helped me quite a bit. She would point me towards stuff on Free Code Camp to look at. And also, we kind of did some pairing up and building stuff, which I learned a lot from. That was really cool. So, yeah, it was really nice to have actual humans to talk to and bounce ideas off of.
So I had a mentor who is an old friend of mine from college, and his story is he was working for the U.S. Forest Service, and then he taught himself how to code, and now he builds their fire tracker application. So it's like the map, you can go and look at where all the wildfires, and it's all like real time and super cool. So he was self-taught. He had been in the industry like a couple years before I had posted on Facebook saying, oh, I'm interested in learning how to code. So he just reached out to me and, he's like one of those people that's always online. And so I would be like going on Free Code Camp stuff in the evening after work, and he would be online. I would just be messaging him. He lives in South Carolina, but he was such a big help at the very beginning when I like just had so many questions and I just didn't understand some of the concepts, and he was just so patient. So definitely, big shout out to Reggie, but also just finding the local Free Code Camp meetup group and this community here. A lot of I would just go in and I would find other people who were learning or people who knew a little bit more than me, and I'd just ask a bunch of questions and, found a couple people to work on the Free Code Camp projects with. So I like pair built one or two of them together with someone from the Free Code Camp community. I found some people who were doing a book club on a book called You Don't Know JavaScript. And so I joined that book club, and it was at Stoff's Coffee in Grandview, and I just would show up, and I by far knew the least of the. I think there were like people who were already professional developers in the book club, but I would just show up and kind of listen and read through the book as best I could, and just glean everything I could from those conversations. So definitely, I think Will said this earlier, but it's definitely not. When you're self-taught, you're not doing it all by yourself. You have to reach out and find people to support you along the way, and then eventually you get to a point where you can also support other people along the way. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about Free Code Camp, because it really helped me get a long way towards where I am today.
Yeah, I'm super introverted, so I don't really do groups or people much, really. And it makes everything way harder than it has to be. I've been able to find some people at work that I can like work with and get mentored on, but it definitely, when you go from like the tech elevator environment where you have a whole class and everybody's like wrestling through everything together and you're doing it together, and it's very helpful. Like one person will understand it really well and they can help you do it. And like tomorrow is your turn, you understand it well and you can explain it to them. And it's just that level of camaraderie and community. I mean, it's not just in programming either. Like this is our entire world, like everything about humanity is built around communities. And if you're trying to be passionate about code, you got to find a community that's passionate about code. Like you're like, what's the old thing they tell you when you're in schools? Like, you find the people that you want to be like and make those people your friends. And it's not. Don't think you're gonna bring somebody along with you. Like just go find the people you want to be with and be around them. You know.
Yeah, very true. So here's the first tough question I'm going to ask you, the panel. What are some things that you think are missing from the Free Code Camp curriculum that you wish were there? Lessons that might be there, maybe some real life examples, or just maybe if you have an example of something, because I've heard the members that I've collaborated with have told me some things. I just want to get your opinion.
So first off, I think that the curriculum is pretty comprehensive, and they keep adding more and more to it. And you can actually donate to the nonprofit if you are want to support the mission in that way. But they've got developers that are actively building out new modules and all that. Something I don't think I've seen, unless it's been added really recently, is anything about source control and using Git. Which actually we've gotten feedback from our local members that would be something that would be useful to have, like an overview about how to do this, because when you're developing on your own, which is what you're typically doing when you're learning, you don't really have to worry about complicated source control and making sure my code doesn't overwrite your code, or but when you work professionally in software development, 90% of the 90+% of the time you're working on a team with other people who are working in the same code base as you. And so you have to figure out how to use version control to make sure that you're all contributing in an orderly fashion to the code base. And Git is the primary way that people are doing that these days. So yeah, something about version control I think would be a good addition. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much like hits it on the head, is not just Git, but like a lot of the things that are a part of the larger ecosystem of developing. It's not just, writing loops. I mean, it boils down to writing loops at some level, but the pushing builds, using like control systems, a lot of that next level stuff, like I had never even heard of. And they're like, we're gonna do this. I'm like, I've never even heard that word before. Like, what are you talking about? And it's true even in like Tech Elevator, where like they taught us Git and they taught us like Scrum and stuff like that. But it can depend on the projects you get on. If whatever job you get, maybe it'll be a small project. Like my wife doesn't have the same issues that I have, where it's like I don't even know what that word is. And like JP Morgan, like they'll take like open source software or something proprietary and tweak it for their internal needs. And it's like I can't even Google anything about how to do this. So, I mean, free code camp is about learning how to code and not learning how to be like an employee, and those are different skills. So there is stuff I think that it could do. Like it's more front end focused. It could have some more back end type stuff.
All right, excellent. So let's start getting into a little bit about more the professional aspects of your training. So, like for example, some of you have mentioned coding boot camps, and I believe that I'm looking at your bios here, and Mike, you went through We Can Code It. Travis, you had the apprenticeship along with your experience with Tech Elevator. So, kind of talk about what that was like. Like, give us a structure. I know that some have a certain amount of weeks that you train, like in a classroom. Some of them, on the job, that kind of thing. And also, we have a question from our virtual audience about. Did any of these places that you did the professional boot camps or anything have any job placement services upon completion or during?
So yeah, We Can Code It. They were pretty good. They didn't have any like direct relationship with any one company. Like there's no, hey, as soon as you graduate, you're going to get a job here. But they did have certain relationships. They'd bring in people. Our final project was presented to a bunch of different people from different companies around the city. So that was pretty good. What was the other part of the question? Describe it. Yeah, I did. They have a couple of different options, but I did a full-time one. It was every day from 9 a.m. to 3, I think, which was nice because I had the opportunity to do it. I wasn't working full-time, and it was nice to, wake up, keep my head in it all day, talk to people about it, which was something I didn't have before when I was kind of teaching myself. I had ideas, people to bounce ideas off of, and teachers to ask and whatnot. There was a cost. Yeah, I got I just got a loan for it. But yeah.
Yeah, so Tech Elevator has a whole separate pathways. There's like two pathways, right? One is called Pathways, and they teach you the soft skills, resume building, interview skills, things like that. And then they have like the programming pathway. So the morning you spend all your in lecture learning how to code, and then the afternoons you spend all your time like working on what you got to do to get that job. And then they have towards the end of the school, they have rounds of matchmaking. They bring in employers, and you meet with different people. And from my understanding, that's true for a lot of different boot camps. You can just search, and that's honestly like it kind of fell into my lap. And like I had the job, so I didn't do all the matchmaking and pathways stuff. So I was just there for the programming portion. But if I was looking for something to invest my money in, I would be looking based on their placement rates, which I mean, they can easily fudge, right? But like Tech Elevator says they have like a 94% placement rate. And if you talk to people from Tech Elevator, they'll confirm it. Like the people who don't get a job, that 6% are people you knew weren't going to be getting a job anyway. So they do a good job screening. And they want to keep their reputation high, right? But then, I mean, you work with people, and like when you're pair programming with somebody and they're always negative, there's always some reason they can't do something. They just don't have a do it attitude, like it's like, I wouldn't hire you, like I don't want to work. I hope you don't get hired at the same company I do. I don't want to work with you. But I think, yeah, almost all boot camps have a placement at least network. I mean, that's the advantage of going to Ivy League, right? Like, you're not really paying $1 jillion for the education. You're paying access to the network. And the same is true for boot camps.
I have yeah. So, just an interesting opportunity that I had. I didn't do a boot camp, but there is a program in Columbus that was spun off. I'm trying to blank on what the overarching organization is, but it's one of the ones that got spun up at the start of the pandemic to kind of connect people and find projects that were kind of pro-social around town. But one of the projects that came out of that was a project called I think it's called Yes We Can, and it's a group of people who work in tech in Columbus, mainly recruiters that do mock interviews. So I got the opportunity to do 3 rounds of mock interviews with people that eventually, could have hired me, and then afterwards do resume review and critique on the interviewing process, and it gave me just a ton of confidence when it was time to actually interview. And so, there are resources out in the community outside of, the boot camps that offer, some of the same things.
One thing that might be marginally unethical that you can do is change your LinkedIn to say that you already do these things and let recruiters come to you. Like, as soon as I changed my profile, recruiters started hitting me up like, oh, are you interested in positions? You interested in positions? And then, obviously I wasn't, but then recently I started taking interviews and working with recruiters, not to find a new job, but just to kind of like figure out where I fit in the industry. Like, I only know my small team that I work with, and I know where I fit there, and it's pretty low, but like, how do I look? Do I look attractive to other teams or like other jobs? Like, what do I need to brush up on? What do I need to bone up on? And I will never job hunt without a recruiter again. Like, they are amazing. Like, they help you tweak your resume. They coach you, like pre-coach you before a call. That's the social engineering hack. Like, change your LinkedIn and let them find you a job. If you can't pass the technical portion of it, like, you're not really lying to anybody anyway.
They're gonna find out.
Yeah, they're gonna find out what you know and what you don't, and make them, make them cut you. Don't ever take yourself out.
Right. Yeah. Make them cut you. And I really don't think that's unethical what you did. I think that's an excellent way to make sure that recruiters notice you. I totally agree. But, this is kind of leading into my next set of questions. And that was talking about, your interviewing process and what led up to your interviewing and how you prepared for interviewing, and, kind of go into details. Did you write a resume? Did you write a CV? Other coaching you received, kind of like how Travis was doing. And if you did hire a recruiter, right? And kind of go into that process up to where you were trying to get interviews.
So one, I didn't hire a recruiter. The kind of the big prep that I did was the Yes We Can group. At the beginning of the pandemic, when all the restaurants shut down, I also had a lot of free time, so I just spent my days building personal projects and putting together a little portfolio. I think the thing that prepared me most for interviewing, though, was from my previous career. Restaurant work is pretty transient work. You do a couple of jobs a year sometimes. So I think I've interviewed for more jobs than, people twice my age, and what I found was really great is that, other than getting to the technical parts of an interview, which is, increasingly a smaller part for most companies, they're kind of moving away from these really insane technical interviews. It's the same as interviewing anywhere else. It's about showcasing all of the things that you do that maybe aren't writing code, right? It's a great opportunity to showcase those soft skills that you have, and that are going to transfer over from the other work that you've done. So, I felt very fortunate that I'm felt very comfortable in interviews in general.
Yeah, like Will said, I built up a portfolio of all my all my projects that I've been working on, just to showcase technically what I knew. It was just a web app actually. So you could hit my site, and then had links to all the projects I'd built and my GitHub and social media, all the stuff like that. So yeah, just a website dedicated to me. um, so yeah, I had that going. And we also in Weekend Code It, we would go through every week. We were building a chart, but basically little social questions that they ask in an interview. If you're an animal, what type of animal would you be? Stuff like that, just to prep for that side of things. So I kind of had questions and responses built out, so I'd review those just to make sure I had good answers for things. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I feel like I might be on the luckier side. I only had 3 or 4 interviews before getting a job, so yeah. That was just a hypothetical. I don't have an answer for that.
So yeah, in the kind of the first part of my coding journey, I really just kept my head down and was learning how to code. But then this kind of like lined up with, as my school year was ending, I knew that it was kind of like a sink or swim moment where I didn't want to commit to another year teaching. And so they asked me in January, which was super early, but to commit, if I wanted to commit or not to the next school year. And I had till February to tell them. And so I was kind of like, I need to like really start figuring out how to get a full-time position in software development. So I kind of had that as my timeline. I really wanted to be in something by June. And so I started, I had primarily been going to like free code camp meetups, but then I started going to some of the more professional user group meetups where I could actually, hear professional level talks and this is a professional level talk right here, but, like talks that are aimed at people who are already working in software development. And so, I went, and a lot of stuff was over my head, but from there, I made it a point to try to talk to a couple people at every single talk I went to, including going up and just thanking the speaker. And just, like trying to network as best I could. There was, Kevin and Sarah on the Discord would remember the name of this conference that was at the same place that Tech Elevator, Rev One Ventures. There's like a Columbus conference that they do there. I don't know if they've done it during COVID, but anyway, so I found like a relatively cheap conference. I was a coding student, I was doing free code camp. And so I got a student ticket to this conference, which is not as expensive as the regular tickets. And so I went to the conference, and but there were a lot of soft skills meetups that were, and kind of job prep meetups that were going around. And so I went to one that was, all about how to improve your LinkedIn profile, because I would say LinkedIn is a pretty integral part in mounting a successful job search. And so I met somebody who was in software development, and he volunteered. He gave me his card, and he was like, "Hey, I'll look over your LinkedIn. Just let me know if you're interested." And so I, met with him for coffee later, and he looked over my LinkedIn and also over my resume, and just gave me some pointers for how to, brush it up, clean it up. So that was really helpful. And then I did the thing that you suggested, Travis, where I basically said that I was a developer on LinkedIn, which, like even when you're learning, you are a developer. Like you're not working in it professionally, but you have to make that mindset shift and say, I am a software developer. I'm actively doing this like every day. And so as soon as I did that, the recruiters came out of the woodwork and just started getting lots of like contacts, and I just responded to every single recruiter, and it was a little overwhelming because there's a lot of them. But I tried to talk to every single one of them. Some of them, they kind of talked to me a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, she's super junior," and like, didn't continue the conversation. But I did manage to just like learn more about the industry and learn more about the professional side of software development just from my conversations with recruiters and people I was meeting at meetups. so just kind of like reorienting my mindset from, I was still coding every day, but also I was like, okay, well, how do I get into the professional side of things and really start building up a network to where I will be ready for interviewing by the time I want to make the final transition.
Refresh my memory on the question.
Get your interviews, create a resume, you hire recruiters. You already said you're hiring.
Yeah, actually, I didn't hire them. I think it's worth it, but I also think it's unnecessary. Companies hire recruiters to find people for them. You just need to find those recruiters. So for me, I think soft skills are very important. So like for the apprenticeship, I had to do rounds and rounds of interviews, but they couldn't be technical. Like they are admittedly taking people who know nothing yet. They haven't done free code camp. They haven't done anything. It's just like, why do you want to work in this industry? Well, I heard it pays well, and so you have to develop skills in order to like succeed in those interviews. Like I would be a good fit because of this and that, and then make sure it's true, So I think seeking out at least some interview prep that is interactive. It's not just like you're not going to be able to give a good speech because you read about how to give a good speech. You got to go to Toastmasters and practice, like take interviews, like, and don't be discouraged. Like just take interviews, take them all, bomb them. Like I'm not qualified for this position. That's not for you to decide. That's for them to decide, but you can learn something from every interview. So the more you do it, the better you get, the more comfortable you get. You work on your people skills, you work on your language skills, It's a very diverse field. Like you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, I don't think. You just got to figure out how you can articulate what you know, how you plan to learn what you don't know, and why you're a good teammate. Like this job is way more social than you would expect. Like they want to work with somebody that's going to be in the next cubicle and not stupid, like as long as you're not annoying, we're good. That's all you're trying to sell yourself as.
Yeah, I appreciate that experience that you had with leading up to the interview. And Travis, you also led into my next set of questions and also fielding a question from our live audience. Kind of talk about the interview process now. You finally got an interview, right? Or you got a few interviews. What was your mindset going into it? What skill sets are your interviewers looking for besides, coding and software development for an entry-level position? And so like there were any particular applications they were looking for. We looked at soft skills, those kind of things. So, kind of talk about those interviews that you finally got and the mindset you had going into them.
Yeah. So for my interview that eventually led to my first full-time engineering position, I was really lucky. I had a job at the time working for a company here in town called Candid. They make those clear plastic aligners, and I was doing what they call workforce management. Basically, I was like the timekeeper for all our support staff, and on the side at Candid, they were letting me build some internal tools that their operations team was using. So I was getting to code. I just wasn't, my title wasn't engineer. So when I got my first interview with Insight, I wasn't looking to switch jobs, right? Like I wasn't particularly thirsty in my first interview. And I think that really helped because I was relaxed, right? Like it was, if I get it, that would be really cool and that would be great. Otherwise, I still have this job that I really like. So, I don't know how I'll ever be able to pull off that hack again, the next time I interview, but it was definitely really helpful at the time. And then, a thing that I know now that I don't think I knew at the time was, how much I had to offer in skills that weren't technical. I had 15 years of management experience where 95% of that management experience is applicable to the job that I have now. I know how to mediate conflict. I know how to communicate under pressure. I know how to admit when I need help. I know how to admit when I don't know something. So one of the things that we've kind of alluded to is this sort of it's not fake it till you make it, right? To change your position on LinkedIn. But what's important when you do is that when you're in the interview, I wasn't shy about, if they asked me something that I didn't know, I was okay to say, oh, I don't know that. And then maybe segue into, the last time I encountered, I didn't know TypeScript. Here's how I upskilled on TypeScript, or here are the skills that I brought to bear to learn the stuff that I didn't know. And I think to an interviewer, that was so much more important than me being able to do a bunch of leak code or, rattle off a list of how to do technical stuff that you never actually really do. I'd say a lot of the time that I'm kind of a walking soft skill. I'm not the best developer in any room that I'm in that has more than 2 developers, but I'm a good teammate. I'm fun to have on a team. And I work hard. So I think just letting those things come out in that interview when I was nice and relaxed really paid dividends for me.
Well, I am actually the best developer in any given room. So yeah, confidence is important. Just like what everyone said, focus on the soft skills. Really putting your best foot forward in that regard. That's what I would think going into the interviews. Just you're not going to know everything. Just kind of be the best you can be. Be someone who is likable that they would want to work with. I would try to do as much research as I could on the company, get something to bring up, something about them to ask about, to be excited about. That kind of shifts the conversation to have them talking about something and you're having a conversation instead of having to answer some hard tech questions. But yeah, focusing on that, being yourself, being confident.
Yeah, so when you're interviewing as a junior developer candidate, they know that you're not an expert in coding. They want to assess whether you kind of have a good foundation and whether you seem like a good fit for the company. And again, I think a lot of people who are making a transition, actually everybody who's making a transition into coding from another career, you do have transferable skills. You don't know what they are. You kind of have to think on it a little bit because you do have them, and definitely highlight those in the interview. But yeah, my process, I was talking to all these recruiters. I ended up with like 3 interviews right around the same time. 2 of them, well, I guess they weren't. It was like I had talked to the recruiter, and then I had been given 2 take-home coding exercises. So I was in the middle of working through those, and then I had an actual in-person tech interview with actually the company where I am at, and Insight, which was formerly Cardinal Solutions when I got hired there. But yeah, so I guess this is probably like, don't do this, but Insight was the only company that made me a job offer, and then I accepted, and I've been really happy here ever since. And so, I think a lot of people have a much different experience than that. You probably do want to talk to more companies and kind of, play offers off of each other and kind of negotiate and find the best fit for you. But I ended up in the best fit for me, from the get-go. And so I think I was extremely lucky in that sense, just, managing to land that interview pretty early on in my job search process.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything new aside from what everybody said. It pretty well hit it on the head. Like for me, they were, like I said, they were soft skills interviews. So like when I went into JP Morgan, they were like, "Oh, we don't really know what to ask you. We've never done one of these. Tell me about a time when you didn't know something and wanted to learn it and you did." And I was like, "Oh man, I always wanted to play D&D, and I never had, I grew up like a poor kid. Nobody ever played D&D, so I was like, I don't know. I got a kid who can read now, and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna look it up online, learn online, and I taught it to my kid, and we figured it out, and now we play D&D. And they're like, wow, that's great. I always want to play with my kid too, you know. And it's just like, you do have transferable skills. You just got to figure out what they are, you know. Like, what does that show? Like, there was a marginally complex system that not a lot of people understand, populated by programmers probably, and you learned it and do it. It's the same thing. Like I was asked to write a for loop on a whiteboard for like a technical interview, and I was like, going from typing it out, like I could probably type it out without thinking about it, but now I'm writing it. I'm like, I don't even know what these words mean. And you forget like a semicolon at the end and stuff, but your conversation while you do it shows that you can work alongside somebody. You compare, like, like I write a for loop in Java because I know Java. It starts this way. I open the bracket and close it down here and make sure I do those things. And as you communicate what you know or your process, your thought process, you're showing them that you are thinking about it. They understand. You're not just staring at the board and going, nah, I can't remember why. But opening that dialogue and keeping it open, they at least understand how you're thinking and probably that you can learn, and ask questions. Like I've never heard a whiteboard process where they were like, oh, do this, and then you asked them like a clarifying question or like, do you mean this or that? Or do you remember if it's this way or that way? I just kind of forget, and they're not gonna be like, well, sorry, not gonna help you. Like they'll probably throw you a bone. Maybe not. Like you're new. Like, and if they don't, you don't want to work there.
So let's now talk about the type of people that interviewed you. Did you interview with managers? Did you interview with technical people? I think we've heard about a couple of technical people. I'm especially interested in Will and Amy since they're consultants and they probably interview a lot more than a lot of us. And kind of go into, those type of people that interview you and, maybe some questions that you wish you might have answered differently, or maybe some dumb questions that you were asked. So kind of go into like these types of people that interview you.
Yeah. So for my first job, I had 3 separate interviews. The first interview was with a non-technical recruiter, and that felt most like the interviews that I was used to. Really cool person, and we just really focused on things that are applicable to tech but weren't strictly tech questions. It was a lot of soft skills and a lot of like I think I remember an answer that I nailed because it got brought up in a second interview was I mentioned if anybody knows Jay Klaus, he talks about this thing called compressed learning. So basically, the best way to learn is under pressure. You're learning for a reason. And I talked about that, and that seemed to be really applicable to, engineering down the line. You're going to have to learn things under pressure. We want to hire people that enjoy that kind of process. And then the second interview was with people that were middle level to higher level folks that do the job that I was going to do. So front end engineers. And that was great because I remember that being one of the first times where I got to nerd out. I love my wife very much, but she does not want to hear about, the coolest new things that Redux can do. She just doesn't want to hear anymore. But these guys did. And that was really fun. So I think what was great about that interview is we had a good time, right? They found that like, oh, this is a guy that can talk shop and we can talk shop back with him. And whiteboarding can do a lot, but like you can, I could at least talk the talk. And then the third interview that I had was with management level, like architect level, high technical interview. And I got lucky because I didn't think that I was going to get this job even on the third interview. So I didn't really know who I was talking to. And that's the one where I do think I made a couple of mistakes. The thing that I remember is I told a very, very accomplished lifetime back-end engineer I was pulling something out of my butt that I didn't really know about. And I remember him saying in the interview, oh, I didn't know that, that Objective-C could do that or something, knowing that I had said something that wasn't true. And I'm still mortified by it to this day. I've seen him since then, and luckily he hasn't mentioned it. But ultimately, I think that was okay. I couldn't hold a great conversation at the architect level, but I wasn't interviewing for an architect job. I could do enough to where they were like, yeah, he's going to be a great junior engineer. So yeah, I think that was the kind of 3 levels that I had, and they stepped up over time. They never felt more difficult. It was just the context kind of changed each time.
Yeah, I had a couple different types of interview. The first one I ever did, it was 5 or 6 people kind of all rapid firing technical questions at me. And that was one of my first ever coding interviews that I didn't get that job. Yeah, it was pretty tough. Yeah. But after that, it was kind of normal. Pretty much all of them from there were, I think, one HR manager type person and then one technical person. That was the bulk of my my interviews. Mostly answering the soft questions to the manager and then the tech questions to the tech person. Just kind of trying to bond with them as much as I could. But yeah, like I said, I only had a couple before I actually got my job, and the one I did, kind of what Will said, it felt good. It felt like a good conversation, like we're really connecting. So that's how I knew that was a good opportunity for me.
So it kind of stuck out, the question you said, where did you get any dumb questions? And I did not. Everyone seemed very professional, but when you're coming from a different background, you kind of need to have an elevator speech to just like explain to people where you're coming from, because it can be kind of confusing. It's like, oh, so you're a Spanish teacher, and like, so you just need a 30-second elevator speech to kind of just be like, wrap it up, tie it up in a bow, like, here's where I come from and here's why I think this is a good fit for me. And I know Tech Elevator kind of teaches people to do that. But yeah, so there was a couple when I was talking to some recruiters, like early on, I kind of fumbled through, like trying to explain where I was coming from. And then you kind of hone it down to something more succinct. But yeah, when I already said that I had 2 kind of take-home coding exercises, which kind of, I think that they function in lieu of a tech interview in some ways, or at least they make you do it first, some companies, and then if that you get your code back, you give your code back to them, and then they'll schedule something where you talk over it with somebody. I never got to that point because, like I said, I was kind of in the middle of 3 things at once, and I ended up accepting a position where I'm at now. But yeah, so with the take-home stuff, they give you an exercise. You have a certain amount of time to work on it, or you tell them when you think you can get it done by. And one of them was, here's this application and it's broken. Can you go ahead and fix it so that it actually works and that it does the thing that it's supposed to do? So that was one type of take home. And then the other one I saw, and I think these are kind of common industry wide, the other one was, it was more front end focused, and it was basically like a wireframe, like mock, and I actually totally misunderstood what I was supposed to do with this. I remember it was a hot dog restaurant. I was supposed to recreate this wireframe mock of a hot dog restaurant, but build it in HTML and CSS. I thought I was supposed to bring my own creative interpretation and build something that contained the same information and maybe copy and paste the pictures, but not actually build it exactly. Because I was like, why would you build it exactly like they already did that? I thought I was supposed to bring my own creative design. And so I was working on it, and then I showed it to actually somebody at Free Code Camp, and he was like, I'm pretty sure you need to make it look exactly like the picture they gave you. And so I had been going down pretty much the wrong route, and that was just total newbie thing to do. But yeah, and then whenever I interviewed at my company, this was before COVID. And so I talked to the recruiter on the phone, but then they brought me in for, it was probably 2 or 3 hours. And I, I got a tour of the office. I got to talk to some people. I had a technical interview with one senior engineer and then one kind of staff level engineer. And then I talked to a manager. And so in the kind of coding, actually Marco interviewed me. In the coding portion of the technical interview, I hope I'm not giving away any secrets, but I did an algorithm called FizzBuzz. You can Google it. It's pretty simple, but it was just kind of that was, one of the live coding things that I did. And then, just talk me through what's your understanding of object-oriented programming? Tell me about the languages you've been learning. Tell me about what kind of stuff you've been building. Show me your GitHub, talk me through this thing on your GitHub, just kind of, being able to talk about the stuff that you know and what you've been learning. Yeah. Oh, and I guess one other thing, I didn't know what Scrum was at all. I'd not heard of Agile or Scrum. And so the manager comes in and, he's telling me oh, here's how we do things. We have Scrum teams. And I was really fascinated. And I just was asking, it was very obvious that I didn't know what it was, but I just kept asking. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. This is how you guys work as a team. Tell me more. And I think just kind of that genuine interest, even though I obviously didn't know what that was, I think that came across in a positive way. At least I think so, because I ended up with a job offer.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of interviews for this, except the fake ones that I kind of took on just to kind of see where I was at. And so my experience there, I was upfront about it. I'm not job seeking. I would just appreciate if you take some time and interview me, and tell me whether I'm a good fit or not. You can give me an offer, maybe it'll be a good one. I don't know. And I don't know. I haven't had any bad experiences. I was always the worst one at the table, especially when it came to technical questions. I'm admitting these are the things I don't know. You want, this is for a mid-level position, and I'm not mid-level, I'm junior, and I need to know what you're looking for so that I can get there. So yeah, I don't really have a whole lot for that. Sorry.
I do have one more thing. When you interview this, I think this will give you just an automatic leg up, and hardly anybody does it, but just remember the names of the people you spoke to and send them a thank you email, because especially when you're interviewing with technical people, they're taking time out of their normal job. And if you're a consultant, you're still trying to bill 40 hours and then you're taking an hour out of your week to also, interview. Just send them a thank you note and say, thank you, I appreciate it. Because that definitely shows that you're kind of a thoughtful, conscientious person. But I've interviewed a lot of people and I rarely get any kind of communication after the fact. So just a tip.
When I was in a room with one of those architect high-level managers that I interviewed with for the first time after I got my job, I reintroduced myself to all three of them, clearly communicating that I didn't remember their names or who they were. So this is a very good tip.
Yeah, fully agreed on that. And also regarding the elevator speech thing that you mentioned, Amy, I'd have to say that one of my toughest interview questions really wasn't a question. And I'm a better coder than Mike. And so the CEO walks in for the startup that I was interviewing for. He comes in, he slams his notebook on the table, says, "So John, tell me about yourself." I was stumped. I really didn't know what to say. So yeah, I can't express how much having an elevator speech is just important. Just a little 30-second blurb about yourself. So yeah, I really appreciate that experience that the panel just shared. So you got the job, right? You've all got your jobs. You and Will and Amy are in consulting. Are you, Mike? You're not a consultant, right? No, you're not. And you had an apprenticeship, Travis. So talk about the very first. So for you two, the very first assignment that were you assigned to a client, and then for the others, kind of talk about your onboarding process. All right, so when you're onboarded a client or your onboarding process, maybe for the first few days, just the experience there. Was it what you expected?
So my I had a very inauspicious start to my software career. The first thing that I did was nuked my brand new Mac that they gave me. I didn't fully read the directions for setting it up, and there was a very big direction that said, don't do this until you've done all of this. And of course, I did the thing first and had to call IT support and get my Mac completely like repartitioned and all this stuff. It was terrible. But what was really cool about where I started was that I wasn't put onto a client right away. I had about I think 6 to 8 weeks before I had a client, so I was getting paid without any formal work to do. Yes, I felt very self-conscious about, especially coming from the service industry where if you don't find work for yourself to do, you quickly, lose your job. I felt really self-conscious about it, but it turned into this thing that was really great because I had 8 weeks to dive deep into something that I had, never really gotten to work on before. So my manager, came to me and she said, hey, you've got this time. It's called bench time. We're going to continue to pay you while we find you a client to work for. What are you going to work on during this time? So I did 8 weeks where I dove for the first time ever. We talk a lot at Insight about being a T-shaped developer, right? Where you've got, your T and you go deep on something. So I'm T-shaped on React and front-end development. And the thing that I dove deep on was technology Redux. I got to spend 6 to 8 weeks really learning for the first time a technology really, really specifically, and it's paid huge dividends ever since because I get to bring that technology to bear and kind of be a subject matter expert at my client about Redux, which is awesome. So I think my onboarding is a little, it's not traditional if you're going to go be like a staff engineer, but it gave me time to reach out and meet people and make connections and then dive deep into this technology. So it was a really positive and cool experience for me.
So for me, I guess leading up to that first day, I had thought a lot about, what does a professional project look like? Because I had built my own small things and I had never worked in the field. So I was curious how different would that look from what I have. So my first day or two was spent kind of just combing through the code base we had going, which luckily was not too, there were things I hadn't seen and or didn't know in there, but the core of it, I felt like I did. So that was nice, and kind of cut some of the anxiety I had, I guess, about am I good enough? Are they going to find out I'm a fraud or whatever? But yeah, I went through that and just kind of worked with team lead and other people in the company to get my footing. And then I remember the first time I was going to push in a merge that I worked on solely by myself, but I was really apprehensive about it. I probably confirmed 3 or 4 times. Are you sure you want me to merge this now? You want to take another look, make sure I didn't break anything? But since then, yeah, it's been a lot better.
Yeah, so also being, at the same consulting company that Will is at, I also had bench time when I first started. And so that means I wasn't allocated to a client right off the bat. I had a client that was 10 hours a month. So it was this kind of managed service contract where I was just helping to maintain a WordPress site, which was something I hadn't really had any experience with prior to that, but it was pretty straightforward. And so that did leave me a lot of time to upskill. And so I remember going through Pluralsight courses and really kind of diving deep onto, I had been primarily more front end, learned more front end, but I wanted to be full stack. And so I found some C# courses and just started working through that. I also just used that opportunity to kind of plug myself into the company culture. And, there was a book club going on. And so I joined the book club. There was like an internal talk series that, I made sure I would go to that just to meet and talk to people. And honestly, it's crazy how much the culture has changed, like during the pandemic. It just from being in person to being mostly remote. But there was like a different lunch every day that I could probably like join up and like eat with my coworkers and listen in on whatever thing was going on or whatever event was going on, and learn and also just kind of get plugged into meeting people, because it doesn't stop. Like even when you're at a job, you want to continue meeting people. You're not going to continue to advance your career all by yourself. Like you need to have people in your company who will help you out, who will explain things to you, who are part of your network and they're your coworkers. And so just I kept doing that while I was waiting for a client.
Yeah, my experience at JP Morgan was actually really similar, but not on purpose. So the apprenticeship cohort that I had was like 6 people strong. There was only one group before us that had done it that was 5 people. And so we were very much like lost, like nobody knew what to do with us or what was going on. And we had one person who was kind of like in charge of the apprentices, and she was supposed to find places like managers that would take us onto their team. And then she found one guy who was like, oh, I just got this new team. I need to restructure it all because it's like failing miserably. Like, I'll take them all. And then we didn't have desks. He hadn't restructured the team yet. So we had like 2 months of just kind of like floating around the building. Like we ended up just like taking a table at Starbucks and sitting in circles. And he's like, yeah, you need to find some personal projects, something to do. There's a lot of internal stuff. Like you got to do all the cybersecurity classes. And then I was in the asset and wealth management line of business. So I had to go through all these finance classes. I had to like declare all my investments and all this other stuff. It was just agonizing. But so JP Morgan is like 200,000 to 300,000 developers. It's one of the largest tech companies in the world, which you wouldn't ever know. Like we have more developers than Facebook. That's what it was, just like acclimatizing to going from a steel mill like months prior and like having to wear a hard hat and try not to get crushed by something to like, hi, my name's Travis, like, sorry, my hands are so dirty, like, it's just a lot of getting used to the culture, while not forgetting that you are a developer and you're still expected to use this time to develop, even if it's not going to be valuable to the company. So I was able to go back and revisit concepts like in Tech Elevator. Like a 14-week boot camp is like a fire hose. And so there was stuff was like I knew I didn't know. Like I got through that portion and like got a passing grade, was like I need to figure that out. So I just like built some personal projects that executed the ideas that I knew I was missing. And they were happy with it. We did teach backs and code reviews and stuff, and it's like good use of time. It's like, okay, great. So pretty much it's like any other job. You got to find a way to keep yourself busy.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your onboarding experience. So I just have a couple more questions, and then we can wrap up our panel. I've collaborated with a few of our members and some other people in the industry, and some of them have said that after they land their first job in software development, they can pretty much go anywhere, or it might be a lot more easier to gain experience from that first job. So basically, once you have that job and you've onboarded, you're pretty much in. So I would ask you, do you agree or disagree with that statement, and why or why not?
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. I think that idea might matter less in the hiring climate that we're in right now. I think that, people need people to work in all fields, and dev, hasn't been excluded from that. So I think maybe the barrier to entry is maybe a little lower now, that where before it had, show us that you work really hard to get your first job, prove that you can do it, and then you can go anywhere. But yeah, I think that that's still probably true.
Yeah, I would say in my experience that that's true. You get a lot from the first job. I would think most people. I definitely did. In terms of just knowledge from more experienced people, working under pressure. So I would say, yeah, that builds your knowledge, your confidence, and specifically with tech. I know as soon as I put on LinkedIn that I was working as a developer, that yeah, even with the I'm not looking for a job, the recruiters came pretty hard, and still continue to do that. So yeah, I would say yeah, I would say that getting the first job is a big step.
And just to add to that, I think, companies, and rightly so, you can't just have an entire team of junior developers. Like you need to be able to absorb juniors in a kind of like a piecemeal fashion, so you can bring them on, train them up. You always want to have, if you're at, my opinion is, if you're at a good company, when you're hired on as a junior, you're not going to just be put completely by yourself on something. You're going to have people that you can work with that are more senior and you can learn from. In an ideal situation, it might happen for a little while, but ideally you do have people that you're still learning from, but that takes and so long story short, I think that's why companies, it is hard to find, it's harder to find that first position than it is to find the subsequent ones, because you can only hire so many juniors at once. I think there are companies out there that have this attitude about, not wanting to hire juniors, but I think that's the wrong attitude. I think that when you hire somebody who's a junior, you actually have a really big opportunity, because they're super passionate, they're super excited, it's their first job, they're really eager to prove themselves, and also you have an opportunity to train them exactly the way you want them. They haven't learned any bad habits yet, so they don't really have any habits. And so I'm definitely a big proponent for, companies hiring juniors and doing it in a responsible way. But I think there's an article out there called "If You Don't Hire Juniors, You Don't Deserve Seniors," something like that. And I definitely recommend giving it a read. It'll kind of give you some confidence as a junior developer, to know that you also have value, you also have a place. Because also, like, companies, you want to give, like, some of the low level kind of like easier coding work. You don't want to waste your money on a senior developer to have them do that, when you could have a junior developer do it for less money, and that junior is learning at the same time and on their way to becoming a senior. So yeah, long story short, I think once you get your foot in the door, though, like, the recruiters are gonna there's always recruiters, there's always opportunity to switch jobs if you want to, after you get your first job.
Yeah, so I'm obviously in the first job I've ever gotten, so it's anecdotal evidence, but I see people juggling the companies, right? They'll leave JP Morgan. It's notoriously difficult to get promoted from within JP Morgan. Like, once a junior developer, always a junior developer. But people will leave. They'll go to Huntington, work in a job there for 10 months, and come back with like a 2-level jump because they got the title at a different company. And like, it's not even like frowned upon. This is just like part of the industry strategy. Like, I don't understand it. And it's spiraling like out of control right now in like this post-pandemic, or almost post-pandemic situation we have. Like, people are jumping companies like crazy. Like I've lost half my team to Insight already. I am not lying. It's really hard for us at JP Morgan, at least in my line of business, is a little bit different. They have the digital line of business, which obviously is better for junior developers than where I ended up. But you do have to use that interview process to interview them as well. Like, find out about their mentor culture. Like, are they teacher oriented? Like, do they want to teach? And if you get any sort of hesitancy, that's their best foot forward. Like, don't go take that job. Otherwise, take the first job that you can get, and then keep interviewing. Like, you're not married, or you're not married to the job anyway. Yeah, like, take what you can get. Like, you got to get your foot in the door. Once you got a title, it's different. That's why it works when you change your LinkedIn to say you're a developer.
Excellent. So, my final question now, since we've gone over by about a half hour, not long. But my final question is actually a difficult one. If there is, taking into account everything you've told our audiences today, if there's one thing that you could change having the experience that you have now, what would it be? Like for me, there is I got some freelance opportunities, and I would say that the reason why I thought that was a waste was because I didn't learn anything. I didn't learn anything about the coding. I didn't learn about anything about what's important, about everything you've mentioned about working on small teams, about soft skills, about networking. So if there's one thing that you would change, you don't have to answer, what would that be? Oh, Travis. And actually, Travis, since you're going to take the mic, could you describe to our audience what the hell a full stack developer is?
Yeah. So as a full stack developer, it is very challenging. Maybe, I mean, like I'm not the brightest bulb, but I give, at least 75% effort to like try stuff. And full stack developer is a little bit of everything. It's like I learn SQL, NoSQL for our databases, and like we have a database to manage the database metadata, and then I have like 150 different APIs that apply. I have the program that the customers use to manage their documents. And then I have an administrative program that admins can use to manage those document folders, and then there's front ends, and there's adding a new feature. Like I want a download button for that. Like, well, that exists somewhere else. And so it's just a front end tweak. That's great. That code's already there. But then now we want to incorporate e-sign so we can e-sign the document. Well, that's a full stack thing. That's got to touch the database. That's got to pass all the way up to the front end. It's got to go third party outside of the company. And so what I would change about my last 2 years in development was, I mean, I don't even know how I would have changed it, but I'm not getting T-shaped. I'm just like I'm horizontally shaped, right? Like I've touched so much technology that like I can't retain it. I've got a very good surface level understanding of a lot of different things, but not any one of them good enough to get another job somewhere else doing just that one thing. So like you have to focus on diving deep on one specific technology. And I would have used those last 2 years to really try to do that more. Like I can only learn from work what stories I get to work on, and it's all over the place. So, I mean, I did learn new things. I learned lots of new things, but I hadn't taken the personal time for, I think, very valid reasons. I didn't take the personal time to dive really deep on it, and as my kids get older and, I can get them a cell phone and they can just leave me alone forever, then I can start to do that. And like, I'm starting to get to a phase of my career where I understand the surface enough to where I can start diving deep. So that's just what I would suggest is you do have to dive deep and you have to continuously learn.
So it's a tough question. I'm pretty happy with how my career has gone so far. Um, but yeah, just I'm also not really one who does. I don't code outside of work. I have a 2.5-year-old, and I like to do other things too. I have my family. Obviously, I spend a lot of time with them and my husband and my son, and but because of that, I just have hobbies. I see my friends and all that. But because of that, you do have to be very focused while you're at work, and really use your time wisely at work to um, like figure out where you want your T shape to be. And I'm starting to get a T shape. I think it might take you a couple of years before you really figure out like, here's where I want to deeply specialize, and here's where I want, I do consider myself a full stack developer, but I'm definitely starting to find kind of some depth in Angular, and Angular, the front end framework, and NGRX, Redux. And so just starting to do that. I don't know if I should have done that earlier, or if I should have kept, like I really do enjoy the full stack experience. So I don't know. It's kind of a pick and choose your own adventure. I don't even know if it's something I would have done differently, but sometimes I think like, oh, maybe I should have like really specialized like a lot earlier. Maybe I should, not specialize quite yet and keep being more broad, because there's so many directions you can take your career in. Like right now I'm also interested in learning more about the cloud, and cloud technologies, because I do think that's a big part of the future of software development. So it's like, well, I'm just going to expand my stack and, at the same time be trying to deepen it in an area, and it's kind of hard to like balance those tendencies.
Yeah, kind of what Amy said, to add on to that, cloud stuff, learning that. I think that is big, and it's only going to get bigger. Another thing I wish I would have focused on more when I was learning was testing. That's pretty important stuff, and it looks really good, I think, on interviews if you can show that. That and networking. I guess when I was coming along, it was in the heat of the pandemic, so there wasn't much in-person stuff. But yeah, if you can get out there and network as much as you can, I think that's huge. So I wish I would have done more of that.
Yeah. My big regret is, I think it was 2011. I spent 6 bitcoins on. Yeah, yeah. No. My bought a pizza with it. No. I think I wish that I would have tried to become a professional faster. That inventory software that I wrote was in 2014. I got my first job at the beginning of 2021. If my math's right, that's about 7 years in between. I don't think I was ready to be a professional in 2014, but I think I was ready a lot sooner than 2021. I don't actually regret it. I'm very, very happy with how things have turned out and where my life is now, and maybe personally I wasn't ready, but I think my skills were ready sooner than I was. So I think I could have started sooner. But other than that, for anybody that's thinking about this kind of life and making this transition into this life, it's a really great career. It's very, very rewarding. The people are cool. You get to be creative. The pay ain't half bad. So I don't have a lot. Just wish I had those bitcoins back.
Excellent. All right. Will, Mike, Amy, Travis, I want to thank you very much. You've provided a lot of experience, a lot of things for our audience to think about. Really appreciate it. Great answers to the questions. I kind of want to just close on a closing note from a comment that Doug from our virtual audience sent. And he said that he sent a thank you note to a manager who told him that it broke the tie between him and another developer, and he said it was his favorite job. So it really, like everyone has said here, pulling from what you already have is so very important. And a lot of times it's the little things and working in small teams and the soft skills, networking. These things are very important. That it's an enhancement to stuff you can learn in Free Code Camp and what you're doing right now. So does anyone have any closing thoughts they'd like to share? Nope. All right. Well, that concludes our event. Thank you very much for attending. Should I drop the mic?
Everybody still with us? No, yes, maybe. I don't know. Where everybody is.
We're all muted.
You're all muted.
We're all muted. I don't know how to hit the
Did you
unmute
manually
button.
mute everyone?
I manually unmuted several people, but they already left.
I was actually doing that myself too.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you helping out.
Well, no, I don't have that opportunity. I was just clicking over. I think it's more local rather than if you're an admin.
I know, I'm just giving you a hard time.